Fintech Chatter TV. Presented by Tier 1 People. Leaders in Fintech Executive Search.
I lead our digital partnership team across Australia, New Zealand and the South Pacific Islands. And the real focus for myself and for my great team is really to work with institutions and organizations. Some of them are scale-ups, some are traditional kind of fintechs, others are just non-bank financial institutions that are looking to add a payment element to the platform or capability or experience that they have. So whether that's a small business capability, whether that's something that's focused at commercial card capability, or whether that's something that's wholly focused in on consumers. Our role is to help them, to educate them about the market if they're coming in from overseas, and then perhaps even take them down that path of becoming a principal licensee of Visa, or connecting them to one of our enablement partners that work in the ecosystem to bring their solutions to life. The team is pretty modest. So we have a team of 4 at this point in time. So our team is really broken down into business development and account management, so looking after those fintech and scale-up clients. So a lot of focus on bringing those new ones in, so a lot of kind of farming work that we do on that, and then also a lot of hunting, going out there and finding those new opportunities and then obviously helping them grow over a period of time. Yeah, there's a few that are publicly out there and you can see their propositions in market already. So quite a few are homegrown organizations that are like, household brands in the Australian market. So if you think along the lines of Zip and Afterpay as an example. Others are international organizations that have expanded into the Australian and New Zealand market. So Revolut, Wise, Crypto.com are classic examples of those. Interesting. We always consider ourselves as the original fintech. We are probably the largest fintech organization in the world. So, connecting banks, connecting financial institutions, merchants and acquirers and issuers together with one network is not an easy task. And you build scale over time and ubiquity. The ability to see the Visa symbol everywhere and know that you'll be able to make a payment using your card is incredibly powerful. But you're right, innovation has changed dramatically over the period of time, over the last 60 years of Visa's history. And particularly in the last 11 years, I've been working at Visa for 11 and a half years, and I've seen incredible innovation during that period. If you think about 2011, it was really the starting period of being able to tap with your card. Yeah. And contactless and PayWave became available and became ubiquitous across the marketplace. Now we see that globally. Australia has been one of the leading markets in relation to contactless technology, and it's all about making the experience seamless and as easy as possible for the consumer to make payments and for merchants to receive payments. I mean, we are a lean organization. We pride ourselves on that. We're technology-led, and as a result, you should hope that you don't have to rely on huge numbers of people to run the company. So, you can take a look at our annual report. You'll see that we have a touch over 25,000 employees globally, and a lot of those have been added in the last sort of 3 years. Yeah. So you can see that expansion during that period of COVID, really, more than anything else. And that's really indicative of the fact that we've expanded beyond our traditional network. We've adopted this network of networks strategy and approach. And as a result of that, we've built out our value-added services. So things that are adjacent to payments, but aren't the actual payment itself. Again, making life easier for consumers, for issuers, for acquirers, and for the merchants. I mentioned before that when we look at contactless transactions, one of the markets that leads that is Australia. Around 99% of all face-to-face transactions are contactless. So that's one element of it. The adoption of tokenization within the Australian market is also incredibly high. So even though the population is relatively modest at 24 million people, we punch above our weight in terms of innovation. We punch above our weight in terms of the adoption of new technologies. Obviously, Australia is a wealthy country. We have a large penetration of consumers and businesses that use payment cards, whether it's ours or one of our competitors. So the adoption of electronic payments has always been strong within the Australian market. So definitely incredibly important to Visa as a whole and incredibly important to our Asia Pacific business. The role really is to make sure that we're educating everybody who wants to listen about the role that Visa can play, the technology that we have, and the way in which we can help fintech scale-ups get to market. Now, if you go back a decade, Visa's main business really relied on large financial institutions, big banks typically, and big acquirers across the globe. What happened in about 2016, 2017 is that we developed our digital partnership team. And this was a global initiative that we led within Visa. Australia was one of the first markets to jump on board with that. And through that period of time, it was about making it easier for our prospective customers, fintechs and scale-ups, to work with Visa. And what that meant was lowering the barrier of entry when it comes to licensing, so making it easier to become a Visa licensee, whether you're accepting payments or whether you want to issue cards to make payments. And then also some commercial incentives that sit around that. So when we're working with a fintech to help them in those early years to get set up and to give back some of our fees that we charge in the form of incentives so that we can help them along that journey. I think what makes us really happy is when you see an organization that adds in card payments for the first time and they're working with us and we start to see them scale really rapidly. We start to see them making a difference, providing a better user experience and delivering a solution that customers really want. So I think, without calling out too many names, but the growth of Zip over the last few years, the growth of Afterpay in the New Zealand market is another great example. And then the likes of Revolut and Wise, the way that they've transformed international payments and the support we've been able to provide, again, through the provision of issuance of Visa cards has been great, because what it means is that they've got more engaged users. It means that their users have got more utility when it comes to using that capability, because on top of being able to move funds or buy something in 4 installments, they're then able to use a Visa card to buy things in more places. That ubiquity that I mentioned before, 84 million merchants across the globe, the ability to walk into a store, whether it's in Saigon, whether it's in Sydney or whether it's in San Diego, and be able to tap your card and know that the Visa card transaction is going to go through. So I think it gives organizations, Australian organizations as well as international ones, it gives them that global appeal. And like I say, that additional utility of the capabilities that they've built. Yeah, I think when it comes to that path overseas, you've got to make sure that you've got customer fit for those markets. Making sure that, yes, it might work in Australia, but for it to work in New Zealand or for it to work in the United States or the UK or Singapore, you've got to make sure that that same customer fit exists. And also that the competitors haven't already stolen your thunder in those particular markets. If it's already occupied, then you might want to think of another market instead. So I think that closely looking at that market research and also understanding the economic levers. Interchange is often a driver for revenue for business, and you need to look quite carefully at that, because in highly regulated markets, that interchange revenue can be far lesser than in markets like the United States, as an example. So, making sure that you understand the economics at play, the customer fit, and then also not perhaps overextending yourself, particularly in the environment that we've got right now. Maybe it's better to focus on your home business and get that absolutely singing before you start to look at expansion overseas. And particularly, we see that in both directions, actually, Dexter. So whether that's a US or a European company that wants to expand to Australia and New Zealand, we spend a lot of time educating them about the local market. We educate them about things like the types of products that might be available, maybe an indication of what the regulations might look like, and then also looking at interchange, that interchange revenue lever that I mentioned before and what that might look like. It's often quite a shock for our US cousins that come to the Australian market to see how heavily regulated we are in relation to interchange. And in some instances, it deters them from entering the Australian market, because the economics just make it uneconomical for them to start this capability in this particular market. So that's a really important part. And we do the same in reverse. So when you've got an Australian organisation that's looking at New Zealand or maybe Hong Kong or Singapore or the UK or Canada, helping them understand what the environment is in each of those markets, what the pitfalls might be, what the challenges might be, and also what the opportunity might look like. So bringing in my colleagues from overseas, so the digital partnership team in Canada or the UK, and getting their view on what that market looks like. Is it at saturation point in that particular capability, or is there an opportunity for an Australian organisation to do really well overseas? What we often see with organizations that are coming from overseas and want to expand into Asia Pac, the first market that's on their mind is Australia. Yeah. Often because they're English speaking, from an English speaking country. Yeah. So they're looking for that commonality to enter into Australia, and then we take them through what it would actually look like if they were to bring that capability here. And if you look at things like user experience and user interface, and you want to launch an Australian proposition in Korea, you really need to think about what that looks like, because what appeals to an Australian isn't necessarily going to appeal to a Korean when it comes to UI. So that's a really important part of it too. But obviously being able to converse with the local regulator, to work with your local team, you need to take these things really seriously. You know, Google Translate will only get you so far. Yeah, we like, and I like the term digital assets as well, actually, if we want to break that down. But there are some crypto exchanges that we work with too, so we can call it what it is from that perspective. But we see them as opportunities. You know, over 70 crypto exchanges have partnered with Visa to issue a Visa card in connection with their digital asset wallets. And the whole point of that is to make it easier for consumers to access the assets that they've accumulated. So whether those assets happen to be stocks or shares, or whether those assets happen to be gold or silver or Bitcoin or Ethereum, then the capability of having a Visa card that is there so that you can convert from those assets into a fiat currency and then tap your card at the grocer, that for us is really important. So building out that user experience. So we don't see that as a threat whatsoever. We are incredibly interested in the capabilities of digital assets, whether that's stablecoins, central bank digital currencies, or whether that's the use of blockchain itself. And internally, we do an awful lot of work around those areas to ensure that we're really well placed for the future. So we have a crypto team, they are called the crypto team, who focus on those digital assets. And led by Kai Sheffield, who's exceptionally well known within the digital asset space. And we are very focused on helping governments, helping business, and helping individuals build out capabilities that are leveraging blockchain, because we think that it's got great utility. Absolutely, and we very much view ourselves as that bridge between traditional finance and digital finance and DeFi, so TradFi to DeFi. So we are that bridge that is there for you to be able to convert those digital assets into fiat, because most merchants still only accept fiat currency at point of sale. We only allow fiat currency to transfer across our network. So it's important that there's that conversion element prior to the transaction or immediately after the transaction takes place, so that the user, the consumer, has that ability to make those payments seamlessly and easily. Brand becomes a key part of what we do. Now, we don't pick winners and losers, Dexter. It's not our role to say, oh, this is going to work, this one isn't going to work, this exchange is going to fail, this one is not going to fail. But what we do is an awful lot of due diligence to ensure that there isn't excessive reputational risk, financial risk to consumers, and that we are working with decent human beings that are fit and proper persons to run that business. So we do a lot of DD in the background to ensure that we're partnering with the right partners. Doesn't mean that organizations won't fail, of course. And whether that's a crypto exchange or whether that's a bank, there are no guarantees from our perspective on who will succeed and who won't. But we do as much as we can to ensure that cardholders won't be impacted and that merchants won't be impacted. Look, again, one of the benefits of working for a global organization is that we tend to see a lot of great innovation from all over the world. And we share those innovations within our teams so that we can see the different use cases that are evolving, and that we can see the different ways in which a Visa credential or a Visa token is being implemented to make life easier for consumers and businesses. So along that journey, I think there's been an awful lot of interest in the central bank digital currency space. We've also seen some great usage of stablecoin, particularly in the way that platforms like marketplaces are able to disperse funds through to individual merchants in near real time. So of helping that cash flow capability, particularly if it's across borders. So the use of a stablecoin or the use of a central bank digital currency can have some real application and some real benefit to those small business merchants in the future. Look, it's a great question, because I think for a long period of time, people thought that the tap would be on forever and cheap, easy money would be accessible for the foreseeable future. That proved not to be correct. And now we've started to see interest rates rising, and we've seen the capital markets certainly thin out quite significantly. It's about coming back to basics, Dexter. And I think it all comes back down to, do you have a product that is fit for purpose and a product fit for market? Are there consumers that want to use your product, and are you solving a problem? And if you can't answer yes to all of those, then you've got some real challenges and you need to rethink. The other thing is, what's wrong with starting a business and running it and bootstrapping it yourself for a period of time to build up some credibility, to build your underlying platform and start to attain customers, start to bring on some customers, then look to raise capital. I think we were getting it the other way around for a period of time where on the back of a good idea, or potentially a good idea, and a PowerPoint deck, there were people pitching for finance and getting fundraising rounds under their belt for a product that didn't exist yet. So I think it is about making sure that your product will sustain even difficult market conditions like this one, and that it really has a market application and that you've got consumers that you can sell to. It's not cheap to run a card program. It takes resources. It takes human capital. It takes an awful lot of time. And it takes an awful lot of expertise. And that expertise is not inexpensive either. Right. So you've got to get all of your fraud and security systems up to scratch before you even start, because your credibility could be ruined on that first transaction if it's not. So our advice is always to build up your customer base and then potentially look to outsource that capability rather than run it all in-house. So we've built up a stable of excellent ecosystem enablers that can step in and provide that service on behalf of Visa. So if you think about the likes of Neom and Novarti and Shape and Indu and Cuscal and Airwallex, those are all Visa enablers. So they are principal licensees that can help a fintech organization build their capability. It'll be completely white labeled, so it looks and feels like the fintech's proposition, but in the background, it's being outsourced to somebody else. So we used to call them bin sponsors and program managers. I think ecosystem enabler is probably a better terminology for them, because they're providing a wide range of services to get those organizations to market. So rather than build it all in-house, look to partner, particularly if payments is not your core business. If you're a crypto exchange, or if you're a buy now, pay later service, or if you're a small business invoice capability, then payments might be part of your proposition, but it isn't the central core of your proposition. So outsourcing those periphery capabilities of payments to somebody else makes an awful lot of sense from our perspective. Definitely do your homework first, because for an organization like Visa or for one of the big four banks in Australia, reputational risk is the one thing that we're all very laser focused on. And so ensuring that you've got the correct licenses, that you've got the correct people, that you've got experience within your organization. And if you are a payment-led or payment as your core capability, then you have to have the right professionals that have got a track history in that market. That gives you that credibility. So getting all of your ducks in the row, from a regulatory perspective, from having the right team in place, from making sure that you have the right platforms. Now, often it's much better, as I mentioned before, much better to go out and partner and buy something off the shelf that is already PCI DSS compliant when it comes to payment transactions, rather than build it from scratch in-house. That's a far riskier proposition. And should you be fortunate enough to partner or be acquired or invested in by a large bank, remember that they are going to expect to see some level of return. It might not necessarily be financial return from day one, but they're going to need to see some development. They're going to need to see some capability expansion. They're going to want to see you help them build their business. You know, that's why they've invested in most situations. It's about how can you build out the user experience for their customers to a higher level and to give them a point of difference. So it's not easy money if you should get invested by a large organization like a large bank, because there's still going to be demands on you to deliver, and that reputational risk is going to be ever present. So it's about running a really tight ship. You can go to visa.com.au, and there's actually a form there that you can complete, and that gets sent through to myself or my team, or else look me up on LinkedIn.